Please reach out your hands in prayers over me. Most High, we ask that I may speak with your voice and that we may hear with your heart. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. A virgin will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. May Christ be with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Good News according to the book of Matthew.
Glory to you, O Christ.
This is how the birth of Jesus Christ took place. When Mary, his mother, was engaged to Joseph, before they were married, she became pregnant by the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her husband, was a righteous man. Because he didn't want to humiliate her, he decided to call off their engagement quietly. As he was thinking about this, an angel from the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, don't be afraid to take Mary as your wife, because the child she carries was conceived by the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you will call him Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. Now, all of this took place so that what God had spoken through the prophet would be fulfilled. Look, a virgin will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God with us. When Joseph woke up, he did just as the angel from God commanded and took Mary as his wife. But he didn't have sexual relations with her until she gave birth to a son. And Joseph called him Jesus. This is the gospel of Christ.
Praise to you, O Christ.
So obviously the readings here were very much set up to harmonize with the fact that I am at a Trans Rural Elders Conference. And yes, our congregation meets in Seattle, but I live much closer to bears than buildings. And I wanted to bring forth these readings that are what we would call these days transcoded. But there's so much in the Bible that gets glossed over that really makes a lot more inclusion than we were ever taught. So in Genesis 25, Esau's the outdoorsman. He hunts, he's hairy, he's burly. Jacob is quiet, and a more accurate understanding of staying at home is other translations that say he dwelled in the tents with the women, cooking, as smooth and gentle and such a good cook that Esau lost his mind with how amazing that stew felt when he was hungry. This is very much an aberration from the masculine norm. It's very much an aberration from the accepted norm of the cultures of those regions. And yet, it's Jacob who's the progenitor, who becomes named Israel, after, incidentally, a very queer-coded wrestling match with God. But that's later in history. And then Psalm 139 that I brought up, this psalm gets used against lots of us, against abortion, against a lot of personal freedoms, choices for ourselves. And that's incomprehensible to me. If God knows all, made all, and all is marvelous, that includes our inner truths. God made those too. It includes our deeper biochemistry. It includes us and our usness and finding and claiming our true selves. On your scroll every day was written what was being formed for me before any one of them had yet happened. God, your plans are incomprehensible to me. Same, really incomprehensible. But regardless of where they are, when we come to the very end, I'll still be with you, God. I was marvelously set apart. God's works are wonderfully made. And then we get to Acts. And this story is so well known in the church. We call it Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, but we never stop to think about the eunuch. And it's no mistake that he is described very carefully as a eunuch and as a high official. The word for eunuch and the word for high official were pretty interchangeable in the Hebrew. And so the double emphasis is important to say, yes, he actually was altered. And this matters because he was coming back from worshiping in the temple. Now, a eunuch is not allowed to worship in the temple. In fact, any guy who has any damage or mutilation to his junk is not allowed to worship in the temple, cannot be part of the minyan, is no longer a man before God, according to this Levitical law structure, which remember was about trying to keep the bloodline going. And it's got that emphasis. So we already have this Ethiopian eunuch committing a gender crime to go worship God in God's holy temple. And something tells me that the royal treasurer of the Candace did not just pause in the outer Gentile court, actually went into the men's side. So this is the man that Philip is pulled away from a really huge crowd scene conversion deal going on. That's so big, apostles are coming to see what's going down. Philip is pulled away from that to an empty road where he's told to run up, to catch up with this moving carriage. And by the way, this entourage or this royal official to then teach about this Isaiah passage and about Jesus. We talk about this story as the first outward conversion effort, the first time that we're bringing in somebody outside Israel, because yeah, there are centurions and Roman soldiers in the picture, but they were already in Israel. And this is reaching an outsider who's not stationed there, who literally just came to visit. And the church is really good at identifying all of that, and really bad at identifying just how outside this outsider was. That Philip was sent to bring this good news to this person who defied the rules to find God. And that's huge. And then we get to the gospel. And we picked the conception of Christ thing because we've got Mary giving birth via the Holy Spirit, according to the reading. And we know that the haters love to be literal. The only genes Jesus gets are from Mary, which means he gets two X's and yet is a son. At the very least, Jesus is intersex. And that's how God brings this story. He identified as a man, and he had no Y in his genetic makeup. And so when we're looking at that, it reminds me the rabbi that I've been talking to all this weekend. And let me tell you, two God geeks going at it is just a hoot. um, we were talking about my favorite recent rabbi story. There's a um, Jewish version of TED Talks that I think are Eli Talks or something like that. And it turns out that the rabbi who tells the donkey story that I love so much about how if you're a donkey, you're going to read for the donkey passages. And you're going to notice them because you're a donkey. And look, there's a donkey in the Bible. And so it's really important to see all that's in there when we're talking about the Bible. We lose so much in the centuries that have passed. Simon the Cyrene. Yeah, Cyrenia is in Libya. Cyrene, the North African. there are stories and pieces and inclusions that we have lost, and we must reclaim them. And so I really want our minds just blown wide open with the wonders of inclusion, of a love that says, I don't care where you came from, sit down and have some fish and bread. And so I want us to take a minute and talk about that inclusion and where we see ourselves in the Bible. Obviously, you know which one I see myself in, but where do you see yourself in there? Where do you say, hey, look, there's me? Let's talk.